Exhaustion hit me hard as I shoved the front door open, the weight of a 14-hour shift dragging my bones down. I'd lost a patient today, a 52-year-old guy with a wife and 3 kids, gone because the hospital's ancient ventilator malfunctioned mid-surgery. My hands still smelled like antiseptic and regret, even after scrubbing them raw. I just wanted to collapse, maybe scarf down some leftovers and pretend the day never happened. But the second I stepped inside, the clatter of plates and a burst of laughter hit me square in the chest. They were already eating. My family, my house, and I'm the ghost stumbling in late. I kicked off my shoes, the soles squeaking against the hardwood, and hung my coat on the rack. The dining room glowed under the cheap chandelier we'd argued about buying years ago. Laura won that fight like always. I rounded the corner, and there it was. My spot at the head of the table, taken up by a greasy pizza box, still warm, the edges curled up like it was mocking me. Danny, our med student's son, was sprawled in his chair, tossing a balled-up napkin at Vicky, who just stared at it like she was decoding some secret message. Laura stood at the stove, her councilwoman apron tied tight, stirring a pot of potatoes and hot dogs like she was auditioning for a cooking show. The air smelled starchy and oily, thick with the kind of comfort I hadn't earned today. "Hey, hero's home." Danny grinned, his voice dripping with that insincere sarcasm he perfected by 23. "Save any lives today, Dad? Or just break more hearts?" I forced a smirk, too tired to snap back. "Lost one, actually. You'd know how that feels if you ever showed up to your rotations on time." He laughed, loud and sharp, like I'd told a real zinger. Vicky, our youngest at 15, didn't look up from her plate, just pushed a slice of hot dog around with her fork, her dark bangs hiding her eyes. Nina, our ballerina, wasn't even there. Probably at practice, chasing that perfect pirouette she'd never quite land. And Laura, God, Laura, she flicked her hazel eyes at me, that politician's smile curling her lips. "Long day, Steve?" she asked like she didn't already know. "Yeah," I muttered, dropping my bag by the door. 14 hours of blood and bureaucracy. "You." "Meetings," she said, turning back to the stove. "Always meetings." Her voice had that edge again, subtle, but I'd heard it too many times lately. She'd been staying late at the council more than usual, her heels clicking out the door before I even got home most nights. I used to chalk it up to her ambition. City council's a grind, right? But something about the way she said it tonight, the way her shoulders stiffened, made my gut twist. I shuffled to the table, nudging the pizza box aside. It slid, revealing a stack of mail underneath. Bills, junk, and, a thick envelope with a law firm's logo stamped on it. Laura Hensley, it read in crisp black ink. My fingers hovered over it, the paper cool and smooth against my skin. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up. She didn't turn around. "Oh, probably just council stuff. Zoning matters or something. Toss it on the counter, I'll deal with it later." I nodded, setting it down, but my eyes lingered. Hensley and Associates wasn't some small-time outfit. They handled big cases, divorces, settlements. Not zoning matters. A little voice in my head whispered, "What's she not telling you?" I shook it off. 30 years performing surgery teaches you to trust your instincts, but it also teaches you exhaustion makes you paranoid. "Pizza's cold," Vicky said suddenly, her voice soft but piercing. She finally looked up, her gray eyes locking on mine. "You should have been here." "Yeah, well, tell that to the guy who didn't make it," I shot back sharper than I meant. She flinched and I hated myself for it. Danny snorted, but Laura stayed quiet, mashing those damn potatoes like they'd insulted her. I grabbed a slice anyway, the crust stiff and the cheese congealed. It tasted like cardboard, but I chewed through it, the room humming with unspoken tension. Laura's meetings. Nina's absence. Vicky's stare. And that letter, sitting there like a loaded gun I didn't want to touch. I'd spent all day fighting to keep someone alive, and now I was here, choking on cold pizza, wondering why my house felt like a stranger's. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "what did I miss?" Laura turned then, wiping her hands on the apron. "Not much. Danny aced a test, Vicky's got a recital coming up. Normal stuff." Her smile was tight, practiced. Too practiced. "Normal," I echoed, glancing at the letter again. The logo glared back at me, sharp and official. I wanted to ask more. Why a law firm? Why not just say it? But my tongue felt heavy, stuck. Instead, I took another bite, the grease coating my throat. Then the phone rang. Not mine, hers. It buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up with a name I couldn't quite catch from here. Laura's head snapped toward it, and for a split second I saw it. Panic. Not irritation, not fatigue. Panic. She crossed the room fast, snatching it up and silencing it before I could blink. Work? I asked, my voice low, testing. Yeah, she said, too quick. Just council stuff. I'll call back later. She shoved the phone in her pocket and went back to the stove, her movements jerky now. Danny kept talking, something about a professor he hated, but I wasn't listening. My eyes were on her, on the way her fingers gripped the spoon, white-knuckled. On the letter. On the pizza box in my spot. I'd lost a patient today and it gutted me. But sitting there watching her, I couldn't shake the feeling I was about to lose something else. Something bigger. And then I saw it, her purse by the door, unzipped, a glint of metal peeking out. Keys. Not ours. A car fob I'd never seen before. Whose keys are those? I asked, my voice cutting through the chatter like a scalpel. Laura froze. The room went dead quiet. The silence after I asked about the keys was deafening, like someone hit mute on the whole house. Laura's back was still to me, her hand frozen mid-stir, the spoon dripping potato mush onto the stovetop. The air smelled like burnt grease and tension, thick enough to choke on. Danny's fork clinked against his plate, and Vicky's eyes darted between us, wide and unblinking. I could feel my pulse in my throat, hammering away like it did when a surgery went south. Laura, I said again, sharper this time, whose keys? She turned slowly, her face a mask of calm I didn't buy for a second. They're mine, she said, wiping her hands on that apron like it was a shield. New car fob. The council gave me a lease for work, better mileage, you know. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed, but her eyes flicked to the purse and back too fast. Since when? I pressed, leaning forward in my chair. The pizza box crinkled under my elbow and I shoved it aside. You didn't mention a new car. Didn't think it mattered, she shot back, a little too quick. You're barely here to notice anyway. The words landed like a slap and the room shrank around me. Danny let out a low whistle, smirking like he'd just won a bet. Well, Dad, he said, kicking back in his chair. You're home before midnight for once. What's next? You gonna start doing dishes? I glared at him, my jaw tight. Funny, Dan. Real funny. I wanted to snap something about how I'd spent my day performing surgery trying to keep him breathing, but it stuck in my throat. Laura chimed in before I could, her tone light but edged with something bitter. Someone's gotta keep this house in order, she said, turning back to the stove. You're out there saving the world, Steve. We just live in it. The guilt hit me hard, a cold fist twisting in my gut. She wasn't wrong. I'd missed more dinners than I could count, more school plays, more everything. But before I could muster a comeback, Vicky's voice cut through, soft and sharp like a sharp through skin. Dad, she whispered, barely audible over the sizzle of the hot dogs. You missed my concert today. I froze, the pizza turning to ash in my mouth. Her recital. Shoot. I'd promised her last week, circled it on the calendar in red ink, swore I'd be there. But then the shift ran long, the patient coded, and I looked at her, her small frame hunched over the table, fork still in hand. Those gray eyes weren't accusing, they were just hurt. And that was worse. Vic, I started, but my voice cracked. I'm sorry. I got stuck at the hospital. It was a mess. She didn't respond, just pushed her plate away and stared at the table. Danny snorted, tossing his napkin down. Classic Dad. Saving lives, breaking hearts. You should get that on a bumper sticker. Shut up, Danny, I snapped, louder than I meant. He grinned, unfazed, but Laura shot me a look, half warning, half something I couldn't read. The room buzzed with it, this unspoken tension piling up faster than I could shovel through. I rubbed my face, the stubble rough against my palms, and tried to breathe. 30 years as a surgeon and I could handle a flatline better than this. I stood up, the chair scraping loud against the floor, and crossed to the sink. The water was ice cold as I splashed it on my face, the shock grounding me for a second. Behind me, I heard Laura muttering to Danny something about, give him a break, but it didn't feel like she meant it. My eyes drifted to her purse again, those keys glinting like a taunt. Elise, she'd said. Fine. But why did it feel like a lie? I turned back, wiping my hands on my pants, and tried to reset. So, how was the concert, Vic? I asked, forcing a smile. She didn't look up. It was fine, she mumbled. They clapped. She was great, Laura said, stepping in like she always did. You'd have been proud. Her tone was warm, but it didn't reach her eyes. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and sat back down. The letter from the law firm still sat on the counter, its edges curling slightly in the humid air. I wanted to ask about it again, but Danny beat me to the punch with something worse. "Oh yeah," he said, leaning forward with that smug grin. "Ari texted me earlier, said he saw you on the news, Dad. Something about a lawsuit against the hospital? You holding out on us?" My stomach dropped. "What?" I croaked, my voice barely there. "What lawsuit?" He shrugged, popping a piece of hot dog in his mouth. "Dunno. Ari just said it was on Channel 7. Big drama, I guess. You famous now." I stared at him, then at Laura, who'd gone still again. A lawsuit? I hadn't heard a thing. No calls from admin, no emails, nothing. My mind raced back to the patient I'd lost. His wife sobbing in the hall, the flatline screeching in my ears. Could she have? No. No way. But the doubt crept in, cold and slimy, wrapping around my spine. I glanced at the letter again. Hensley and Associates. Was it tied to this? Or was it something else? Something Laura wasn't saying? "Danny, don't talk with your mouth full," Laura said, her voice tight. She grabbed the pot off the stove and dumped it in the sink, steam hissing up like a warning. "And Steve, it's probably nothing. You know how the news blows things up." "Yeah," I muttered, but my eyes were on her hands, shaking just slightly as she scrubbed the pot. She was rattled. "What?" I pushed my plate away, the pizza cold and forgotten, and stood again. "I'm gonna check the news," I said, heading for the living room. My legs felt like lead, but I needed answers. About the hospital, about that letter, about those keys. "Steve, wait," Laura called, but I didn't stop. The TV flickered on, the screen bathing the room in blue light. I flipped to Channel 7, the volume low but sharp. A reporter's voice crackled through. "Malpractice allegations filed today against Dr. Stephen Hensley, following the death of a patient at County General." My knees buckled. I sank onto the couch, the remote slipping from my hand. Malpractice. My name. On the news. I hadn't even been notified yet. How the heck? I turned to look at Laura, standing in the doorway now, her face pale. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, her phone buzzed again. Louder this time, insistent. She fumbled it out of her pocket, and I caught the name on the screen. Mark. Not counsel. Not work. Mark. "Who's Mark?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous, cutting through the TV's drone. Her eyes widened, and the phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Laura's phone hit the floor with a crack that echoed loudly, the screen glowing Mark, in the dim light of the living room. My chest tightened, the air thick with the hum of the TV, some reporter still droning on about my supposed malpractice. I stared at her, her face drained of color, lips parted like she'd been caught mid-lie. "Who's Mark?" I asked again, my voice a low growl, the kind I'd use when a resident screwed up a stitch. She didn't answer, just bent down, fumbling to grab the phone, her fingers trembling so bad she nearly dropped it again. "Steve, it's nothing," she said too fast, shoving it back in her pocket. "Just a colleague. Counsel stuff." Her eyes wouldn't meet mine, darting to the floor, the wall, anywhere but me. The lie hung there, sour and heavy, like the antiseptic stench I couldn't scrub off after a shift. "That's not true," I snapped, standing up from the couch. The remote clattered to the coffee table, the news still blaring behind me. "You don't drop your phone like that over counsel stuff." "Who is he, Laura?" My hands clenched into fists, not because I wanted to hit anything, just because I didn't know what else to do with them. She straightened, crossing her arms tight across her chest. "You're paranoid, Steve. Exhausted. It's been a long day, let's not do this." "Too late," I said, stepping closer. The carpet felt rough under my socks, the room tilting like I'd had one too many. Keys I've never seen. A law firm letter. Now some guy named Mark? What's going on? My voice cracked, raw and jagged, and I hated how desperate it sounded. Danny poked his head in from the dining room, pizza slice dangling from his hand. "Oh no, it's getting good now," he said, grinning like this was some reality show. Vicky trailed behind him, silent, her eyes big and glassy. "Stay out of it, Dan," I barked, but he just leaned against the doorway, chewing loud enough to make my skin crawl. Laura shot him a look, sharp, warning, but he ignored it. The tension was a live wire, buzzing between us, and I couldn't take it anymore. I needed something normal, something to grab onto. "Where's Nina?" I asked, turning to Laura. She's not even here, what's she up to? Laura forced a laugh, brittle and fake. Oh, you know Nina. Probably twirling somewhere. Danny snorted, wiping grease on his jeans. Nah, she's quitting ballet for TikTok. Gonna be an influencer or whatever. More likes than pirouettes. What? I blinked at him, then at Laura. She's quitting? Since when? Laura shrugged, stirring the air with her hand like it was no big deal. She's figuring it out. Someone's gotta make money, if not with a real job. Her tone was light, teasing, but it stung, like a jab at me at the hours I spent keeping us afloat. She's good at ballet, I said, defensive, my voice rising. She loves it. Why didn't anyone tell me? The words tumbled out and I realized how little I knew about Nina, about any of them. I'd been gone too long, lost in ORs and blood and flatlines. Maybe if you were around more you'd know, Laura muttered, and there it was, the match to the gasoline. My head snapped back to her. Don't start, I said, stepping closer, the TV's glow flickering across her face. I'm running myself ragged out there. I save lives, Laura. What do you do? Play political games with your meetings? Her eyes flashed and she threw the apron onto the counter with a slap. Games? I'm holding this family together while you live at that hospital. You think I don't see you falling apart? You're a ghost here, Steve. A ghost? I laughed, bitter and loud. I'm the one paying for this house, for Danny's tuition, for Nina's lessons, or what the heck she's doing now. You're out there with your council buddies, coming home late, dodging calls from Mark. Stop it, she yelled, her voice cracking the air. You don't get to judge me when you're never here. Danny cut in, sharp and cold. Yeah, Mom, you're not in a position to judge anyone. The room went quiet again, his words slicing through like a blade. Laura's head whipped toward him, her mouth open, but he just stared her down, his smirk gone. What the heck did that mean? I couldn't breathe in there anymore, the accusations, the stares, the TV still yammering about my career going up in flames. I need a minute, I muttered, brushing past them toward the hall. Laura called after me, but I didn't stop. My socks slid on the hardwood, the house feeling too small, too loud, too everything. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me and I locked it, the sound final. I leaned over the sink, gripping the cold porcelain, my reflection a mess, bags under my eyes, gray creeping into my stubble. The faucet dripped, a steady plink-plink that matched the pounding in my skull. I just wanted to wash the day off, splash some water, grab my body wash and, wait. Where was it? The shelf was bare. My cedarwood stuff, the one I'd used for years, gone. Just Laura's lavender stuff and some fruity shampoo. I frowned, digging through the cabinet. Nothing. Then my eyes caught something, a glint under a towel on the counter. I pulled it back and there it was, a bracelet. Silver, delicate, with L and C engraved in loopy script. My breath hitched. Not mine. Not Laura's, I'd never seen her wear anything like it. The metal was cool against my fingers, heavier than it looked. Who the heck was C? My mind spun. The keys. The letter. Mark. Now this. I shoved the bracelet into my pocket, the weight pressing against my thigh. I wasn't paranoid. Something was wrong, rotting under the surface of this house. Laura's voice echoed in my head. You're never here, and yeah, maybe I wasn't. But what had she been doing while I was gone? I unlocked the door, my hand shaking, and stepped back into the hall. The living room was quiet now, the TV off, but I could hear Laura in the kitchen, her voice low, talking to someone. Danny, maybe. I crept closer, my socks silent on the floor, and caught her mid-sentence. He can't know yet, not like this. My blood ran cold. Know what? I pressed against the wall, the plaster cool against my back, and listened. Danny's voice came next, quieter. You're digging a hole, Mom. Better hope he doesn't find the shovel. Then the back door creaked open and I heard footsteps. Someone leaving. I peeked around the corner just in time to see Laura slip outside, her phone pressed to her ear, her shadow stretching long and thin across the porch. She didn't see me. But I saw her, and the car in the driveway. Not ours. A sleek black sedan I'd never laid eyes on before. I stood there in the dark hall, the cold wall biting into my shoulder, watching Laura's shadow stretch across the porch like some twisted puppet. That black sedan in the driveway gleamed under the streetlight, its curves alien and wrong next to our beat-up minivan. My breath fogged in the chilly air seeping through the cracked window, and my fingers curled around the bracelet in my pocket, L and C, its edges digging into my palm. She was out there, whispering into her phone, her voice too low to catch, but the urgency in her hunched shoulders screamed louder than words. Who was she talking to? Mark? Coach? Someone else? My head throbbed, a dull ache from too much coffee and not enough sleep, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away. The back door clicked shut and her footsteps padded inside, soft but quick. I ducked into the bathroom again, heart pounding like I was back in the OR, waiting for a crash cart. The mirror showed a stranger, hollow eyes, jaw clenched tight, a man unraveling. I needed to calm down, get my head straight. A shower. Yeah, that'd do it. I stripped off my scrubs, the fabric stiff with dried sweat, and cranked the water hot. Steam filled the room, thick and suffocating, but it didn't wash away the image of that car, or Danny's words, "Better hope he doesn't find the shovel." What hole was she digging? I toweled off, the damp cotton rough against my skin, and stumbled to the bedroom. The clock glowed 11:47 p.m., another night slipping away. Laura wasn't there, probably still downstairs, cleaning up. I slid under the sheets, the mattress creaking under my weight, and closed my eyes. Sleep tugged at me, heavy and insistent, but then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, sharp, loud, like a scalpel slicing through the quiet. I bolted upright, the sheets tangling around my legs. The screen lit up. Coach. My stomach lurched. Not Mark. Coach. I grabbed it before I could think, the plastic cool and slick in my hand, and swiped to answer. Yeah. I growled, my voice rough from exhaustion and rage. A man's voice came through, low and smooth, dripping with familiarity. Hey sweetie, you still up? I can still taste those kisses from earlier. My blood turned to ice, then boiled over. Kisses. Sweetie. 30 years of marriage, and this creeps on her phone like it's nothing. This is her husband, you creep, I snarled, cutting him off. You can forget those kisses. My grip tightened, the phone creaking in my hand. Silence for a beat, then a laugh, cold, sharp like breaking glass. Oh, you're the big shot surgeon, huh? Steve, right? You've got no idea who you're messing with. His tone shifted, dark and heavy. I'll ruin everything, your little family, your precious career. Sleep tight, Doc. The line went dead. I sat there, chest heaving, the phone still clutched like a lifeline. Ruin everything? My career's already on the news, malpractice hanging over me like a shadow, and now this? The room spun, the air thick with the faint lavender scent of her lotion, like a mockery of everything I thought we had. I flung the phone onto the bed, the screen still glowing, and raked my hands through my hair. This wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger, something uglier, and I was drowning in it. Then it buzzed again, a text this time. I snatched it up, my pulse roaring in my ears. From Coach. Tell him about the deal or I will. The words burned into my brain, sharp and jagged. Deal? What deal? My mind raced. The law firm letter, the keys, the bracelet, Mark, Coach. Pieces of a puzzle I couldn't fit together, but every one of them stank of her lies. I wanted to storm downstairs, shake her until she spilled it all, but my legs wouldn't move. I just stared at the screen, the blue light searing my eyes, until her footsteps creaked up the stairs. She slipped into the room, her silhouette framed by the hall light, and froze when she saw me awake. Steve. Her voice was small, cautious, like she knew the storm was coming. She was in her robe, hair damp from the kitchen sink, but all I could see was that sedan, that phone call, that text. Who's Coach? I asked, my voice low and deadly, holding up her phone. Her eyes widened and she took a step back, the color draining from her face. And what this deal he's talking about? Steve, she stammered, her hands twisting the robe's belt. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I shot up, the sheets falling away, my bare feet hitting the cold floor. Because I just got off the phone with some person calling you sweetie, talking about kisses, threatening me. So tell me, Laura, what is it? She flinched, her breath hitching, and for a second I thought she'd crack, spill it all right there. But she straightened, that councilwoman mask sliding back on. You're overreacting. It's just a misunderstanding. Let me explain tomorrow, okay? You're exhausted. Tomorrow? I laughed, harsh and hollow, stepping closer. The floorboards groaned under me, the air crackling between us. No. You don't get to dodge this. What's he got on you? Her mouth opened, then shut, her eyes darting to the phone in my hand. It's complicated, she whispered, barely audible over the hum of the heater kicking on. Please, Steve, just trust me. Trust you? I spat, tossing the phone onto the bed. It bounced, landing screen up, the text still glaring. After this? After everything, the late nights, the lies? Who's C, Laura? Whose bracelet is in the bathroom? Her head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. What bracelet? She asked, too quick, her voice trembling. She didn't know I'd found it. She didn't know how deep I was digging. I pulled it from my pocket, holding it up, the silver catching the light, LNC, glinting like a taunt. This one. Found it tonight. Not yours, not mine. So who's C? She stared at it, her lips parting, but no words came. The silence stretched, suffocating, until a car engine rumbled outside, close, too close. I crossed to the window, yanking the curtain back. That black sedan was back, idling in the driveway, its headlights slicing through the night. A figure sat inside, shadowed, but I felt his eyes on me, like a predator sizing up prey. Steve, don't, Laura said, her voice breaking, grabbing my arm. Her fingers were cold, desperate. You don't understand? Then make me. I roared, spinning on her. Who's out there? What's the deal? Tell me or I'm walking out there myself. She let go, stepping back, tears welling up but not falling. It's not just an affair, she whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. It's bigger than that. And if you go out there, you'll ruin us all. The engine revved, loud and deliberate, and the car peeled out, tires screeching against the asphalt. I stood there, the bracelet cutting into my fist, her words sinking in like a blade. Bigger than an affair. Bigger than us. The bedroom felt like a war zone after that car peeled out, the screech of tires still ringing in my ears. I stood there, chest heaving, the bracelet, LNC, biting into my fist, its silver edges warm from my grip. Laura's words hung in the air. It's bigger than us, like a noose tightening around my neck. The room smelled of her lavender lotion and my own sweat, a sour mix that made my stomach churn. Outside, the streetlight buzzed faintly, casting jagged shadows through the blinds, and I could still feel that person's eyes on me, even though he was gone. I turned to her, my voice low and ragged. What's bigger, Laura? What's worth torching 30 years for? She stood by the bed, her robe pulled tight, her damp hair clinging to her neck like she'd just crawled out of a storm. Her eyes were wide, glassy, but she didn't answer, just stared at me like I was the one unraveling everything. Then her gaze dropped to her phone, still in my other hand, the screen dark now but heavy with that coach call, that text about a deal. She went pale, her breath hitching like she'd been punched. You heard everything? She whispered, her voice cracking on the edges. Yeah, I said, tossing the phone onto the mattress. It landed with a soft thud, the text still burned into my skull. Tell him about the deal or I will. I heard your boyfriend call you sweetie, talk about kissing you, threaten me. I'm done, Laura. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Her head snapped up, panic flooding her face. No, Steve, you can't. You don't understand what's at stake. She stepped forward, her bare feet slapping the hardwood, her hands reaching like she could claw the words back. This isn't just about us, it's... Stop. I cut her off, my voice a blade. I don't care what it is. You've been lying to me, those late nights, the keys, the bracelet, this coach creep. I'm not playing your game anymore. My throat burned, raw from yelling, but I couldn't stop. 30 years as a surgeon taught me when to cut. Clean, quick, no hesitation. This was it. She laughed then, sharp and cruel, her eyes narrowing. Divorce? Really? Who's gonna want you, Steve? A washed-up surgeon with 3 kids and a malpractice suit? Good luck with that. The words hit like a slap, venom dripping from every syllable, but I saw the desperation behind them, her last swing to keep me down. I clenched my fists, the bracelet digging deeper. I'll manage, I growled. Better than staying with a liar. The air crackled between us, thick with rage and something broken, and I turned to grab my coat from the chair, anything to get out of this suffocating room. That's when Danny barged in, his lanky frame filling the doorway, his med school hoodie wrinkled and stained. His eyes flicked from me to Laura, then back, and he muttered, I knew she'd do this. His voice was low, bitter, like he'd been chewing on this for a while. I spun on him, the coat slipping from my hands. Do what, Dan? What do you know? My heart pounded, loud enough to drown out the hum of the heater kicking on again. He just stood there, glaring at Laura with a disgust I'd never seen in him before, pure, unfiltered, like he'd caught her red-handed. Ask her, he said, jerking his chin at his mother. She's the one with the secrets. He crossed his arms, leaning against the frame, his jaw tight. Laura's face twisted, a flash of fear cutting through her mask. "Danny, don't," she hissed, stepping toward him, but he didn't budge, just kept staring, his silence louder than any shout. "Someone better start talking," I said, my voice rising, the room closing in. "Now. What's she hiding? What's this deal?" I looked between them, my pulse racing, the pieces of this mess jagged and sharp in my head. The car, the call, the bracelet. Danny knew something, and Laura was terrified he'd spill it. He didn't answer, just shook his head and turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. "No, you don't get to walk away. Tell me." "Let go, Dad," he said, pulling free, his eyes dark. "She'll tell you when she's ready, or when she's forced to." He shot Laura one last look, pure venom, then disappeared down the hall, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I turned back to her, my hands shaking. "What's he talking about? What's got him looking at you like that?" The air smelled of her fear now, sharp and metallic, mingling with the stale heat of the room. She opened her mouth, but no words came, just a choked sound like she was drowning. Then my eyes landed on the dresser, the law firm letter still unopened, its edges curling in the damp air. I snatched it up, the paper cool and crisp, and ripped it open before she could stop me. "Steve, wait," she gasped, lunging forward, but I was already reading. The words hit like a punch. Hensley and Associates, lawsuit against Laura Hensley, allegations of embezzlement of city funds. My vision blurred, the black ink swimming. Embezzlement. Not zoning stuff, not council stuff, a serious crime. I kept reading, my hands trembling, dates, amounts, a signature from some investigator. This wasn't about me or the hospital. This was her. I looked up, the letter crumpling in my fist. Embezzlement? You've been stealing from the city? My voice was a roar now, shaking the walls. Is this the deal? Is Coach in on it? Her knees buckled and she sank onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. "It's not that simple," she mumbled, her voice muffled, broken. "I didn't mean for it to." "Stop lying," I shouted, throwing the letter at her feet. It fluttered down, stark white against the dark floor. "How long? How deep does this go?" My mind raced. Coach's threat to ruin everything, the sedan, Danny's disgust. This wasn't just an affair. It was a scheme, and she dragged us all into it. She looked up, tears streaking her face, but I didn't feel pity, just a cold, hollow rage. "I was trying to protect us," she whispered. "The council's corrupt, everyone's in on it. I had no choice. No choice." I laughed, bitter and loud, the sound scraping my throat. "You chose to betray me to hurt the kids. And Danny knows, how long's he known?" She shook her head, sobbing now, but I was done listening. I grabbed my coat, the leather cold against my skin, and headed for the door. "I'm sleeping at the hospital tonight. Don't call me." "Steve, please," she cried, but I was already gone, the stairs creaking under my weight. The living room was dark, the TV off, but the pizza box still sat on the table, a greasy relic of a life I didn't recognize anymore. I stepped outside, the night air biting my face, and saw Danny on the porch, smoking a cigarette, the ember glowing red in the dark. "She's done, Dad," he said, not looking at me, his voice flat. "And she's taking us down with her." I stopped, the wind howling past, and realized he was right. This wasn't over, it was just starting. My chest was tight, heart pounding in my ears. I stood there, staring at Laura, no, not her, but the stranger she'd become in my eyes. The woman I had once loved, the mother of my children, was now a reminder of everything I had to fight against. "Pack your stuff and get out," I said, the words leaving my mouth like shards of glass. My voice was steady, but the weight of what I was doing pressed on me. It wasn't just about ending our marriage anymore. It was about protecting everything I had left. The kids, my career, myself. She stepped forward, her fingers curling around my arm, cold and unyielding. "If I go, you lose everything. The house, the kids, your medical license. You won't survive without me," she spat, her breath hot on my face. For a brief second, I felt a flicker of doubt, the familiar pull of guilt clawing at me. Could she really destroy me this way? But then I thought about Nina, about the lies, about the manipulation. I couldn't let it keep going. I pulled away, my skin stinging where her fingers had been. "Get out," I repeated, my voice more forceful this time, like I was trying to convince myself as much as her. She hesitated, her eyes flickering between anger and something else, something colder. Then, without another word, she began to gather her things, each movement deliberate, calculated. It was like she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, and maybe she had. I watched her go, every step she took echoing in the silence that filled the house. The door closed behind her with a finality that made my heart sink. But just as I was about to collapse against the wall, my phone rang, Nina's name flashing on the screen. I barely had time to brace myself. Dad. I saw Mom with some guy near my dance studio. Nina's voice trembled through the speaker. Who is he? What's going on? My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't let her see me fall apart. Not now. Nina, it's okay, I said, trying to sound calm, but inside I was anything but. I'm going to fix this. You're going to be okay. Just stay calm for me. I could hear the sound of her sobs, sharp and broken, and it twisted something inside me. How could I have let things get this far? I ended the call quickly, but the sting of Nina's words lingered, gnawing at me. What the hell had I just let happen? Then the doorbell rang. A sharp, urgent sound that sliced through the tension in the air. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of who could be on the other side. When I opened the door, there she was, Laura, standing there with that smug look plastered across her face. You think I'm the bad guy? Her voice was dripping with contempt as she took a step forward. Ask your friend at the hospital who really set me up. My heart stopped. What are you talking about? I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips. She took another step closer and I could smell her perfume, sickly sweet and familiar. You remember Dr. Carson, don't you? She said slowly, as if savoring the moment. He's the one who helped me set everything in motion. He helped me get rid of you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Dr. Carson? My colleague? The one I'd trusted? I remembered the whispers, the offhand comments that I'd brushed aside. But now it all came rushing back. The strange rumors, the conversations I'd overheard at the hospital. Could he have been involved in something deeper? Something I never saw coming? Laura turned and started to walk away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of stone. My hands gripped the doorframe as I watched her disappear into the night. My thoughts were racing, each one more confusing than the last. Had I been part of something bigger all along? I ran a hand through my hair, my mind spinning. I had to find out. I had to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost me. I stared at the door where Laura had just walked out, her words still echoing in my mind. The anger that had bubbled inside me began to settle, replaced by something else, quiet, determined resolve. I didn't fully understand what she meant about Dr. Carson's involvement, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let the pieces of my life slip away without getting to the truth. I took a deep breath, grabbing my coat and keys. There was no time to waste. There was a hospital board meeting in an hour, and if what Laura had said was true, I needed to act fast before things spun even further out of control. I stepped into the cold night, the urgency of what I had to do guiding me. As I approached my car, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Steve, it's Carson, the voice on the other end said, cold and professional. We need to talk. It's not just about Laura. You've been caught in something bigger than you realize. My pulse quickened. My gut twisted with the weight of those words, but I knew I couldn't shy away from this. I had to face it head on. I'm listening, I said, my voice steady, though a storm was building inside me. The phone clicked as Carson began outlining a scheme that had been in motion for years. Something much darker, tied to the very foundation of the hospital. The moment I hung up, I realized this was no longer just about my marriage. This was something that could cost me everything. But now I had a choice. The truth was out there and I was ready to fight for it, no matter the cost.